Well, hello, my friends. How is it going? Welcome to D&D Optimized, part of the D4 network. The show where each week we take a deep dive into one, sometimes two, specific character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and, we theorycraft about them, we crunch numbers about them, and we basically try to create a character that is both really powerful but also really fun to play in-game. So if you enjoy creating characters for D&D almost as much as you enjoy playing the actual game itself, then welcome home. This is where you belong, and we are super happy to have you, so thanks for being here. My name's Colby, and I will be your host. Thanks for the feedback on the music. For those that have been watching for a while, I've mixed it up a little bit with the intro music. I think the jury's still out. It seems like most people are saying they prefer the new music. I'm going to try it out for another week or two, and then I think make a decision one way or the other to go back to the old or stick with the new. As for the build this week, if I had a nickel for every time I had somebody in the comments section ask me to do a skill monkey build, I would have like $3, at least $3. Okay, fine. If I had $10,000 for every time somebody asked me to do a skill monkey build, then I would be rich. So what's a skill monkey? A skill monkey is basically a character who is really good at skills. They prioritize skills over other aspects of the game, like combat or survivability. The way I think of them is almost like the ultimate Swiss Army knife, primarily when it comes to role-playing and like out-of-combat utility, right? Of course, though, there are some decent uses for skills once in a while in combat for skill checks, right? Especially like athletics, if you're trying to make grappling checks, things like that. But so, yeah, a skill monkey is like the ultimate know-it-all. So those of you who have been watching my channel for a while can probably guess what my initial reaction was when I first got this request like a year ago. How the heck do I quantify that? I can't put that in a spreadsheet. No, thank you. But it has gotten to the point where I can no longer ignore the requests. To be honest, though, the more I've thought about trying to build a character like this, the more fun it sounded, not only to play in game, but also as sort of a puzzle to try and solve. Honestly, for me, optimizing a character is a lot like putting a puzzle together sometimes. So anyway, the idea seemed like a really good challenge. Of course, I wouldn't be me if I just settled for trying to make a skill monkey. No, it must be a skill monkey that also does lots of damage in combat, or that at least is viable in combat. How about that? Who could still add something significant to their team when a fight breaks out. I mean, I've got to have something to graph. And besides, like I've said before numerous times, I think, the thing that I really love about character optimization, aside from the puzzle aspect of it, is taking a character concept or idea and then like trying to get the most that I possibly can out of it while still staying true to that concept or idea, right? So to that end, for the episode today, where we try to create a skill monkey, I'm giving myself some rules for this particular character. Rule number 1, which takes precedence over all other rules: I must gain proficiency in every single skill in the game, of which there are no fewer than 18, as quickly as I possibly can. Actually, that's the only rule. But beyond that, I do have some secondary priorities, I'm going to say. Priority number 2 is find ways to augment my skills beyond simple proficiency. So gain proficiency, yes, but then what more can I do to increase my skill checks? And priority number 3, then try to get as much sustained damage as possible out of the character while staying true to that first rule, that first priority, and also priority number 2. Now, for those who might be interested in prioritizing damage a little more, still getting proficiency in all of their skills, but being willing to sort of delay getting proficiency in all skills in order to sort of bolster their damage a little bit more early on, stay tuned. In the final thoughts, I'm going to present a couple of alternative paths to what is essentially a very similar build. And so the table is set. Let's dive in. I proudly present episode 59, The Ultimate Skill Monkey. And of course, check out the artwork by my friend Randall Hampton. I really love what he came up with for this particular build. It might be my favorite for like one of my character creations so far. So thank you, Randall, and as always, I'm going to put some links on how to follow Randall in the video description. Before we jump in, of course, I do need to give a quick plug to the video sponsor for this week, Roll for Combat, and their new Battlezoo books that just launched on Kickstarter a couple of weeks ago as of this recording. And by the way, they hit their funding goal in less than an hour, which is pretty impressive. For those who don't know, Roll for Combat is Paizo's official actual play contest. Paizo, of course, being the creator of the Pathfinder and Starfinder TTRPG systems, right? And so Roll for Combat is creating a series of books that are compatible both for Pathfinder and for D&D 5th edition, actually, which is pretty impressive in and of itself. The Kickstarter project is no fewer than 3 books. The Battlezoo Bestiary, and that's the real meat of the project, and is much more than just another monster manual. I'll talk about it more in a second. But then you also have the Battlezoo Ancestry Dragons book, which was written by Paizo lead designer Mark Seifter, and then a campaign adventure book called Jewel of the Indigo Isles. And that looks to be a really fun, like pirate-themed adventure for players level 1 through 10. As for the Battlezoo Bestiary itself, it was edited by Pathfinder editor Patrick Reaney. It's 172 pages filled with 114 monsters that were actually all entries from the RPG 2020 Superstar contest. In addition to all the new awesome monsters, some of which you're seeing here, they have a couple of new classes that I'll probably do a brief look at next week. But I think my favorite part of the Bestiary is the new and super unique monster parts system. This has like a whole system of upgrading your gear, making new weapons, new armor, new items from monsters and monster parts. So, you know, a dragon tooth dagger exists in D&D currently, right? As well as like dragon scale armor. Why can't we make that stuff ourselves when we slay a dragon? Well, now you can. There are a ton of ways to customize and imbue your gear with, say, like different elemental damage types or resistances to make it sturdier, or make your weapons inflict debilitating statuses on enemies, etc., etc. It sounds to me anyway like a ton of fun. It could really add a lot of like challenge and creativity to the game, but also give you like something else to strive for as a player and a list to go down, to monsters to try and hunt. I don't know. It sounds like something I would love to kind of dabble in. Anyway, you guys should absolutely check out the Kickstarter, back the project. As always, I'm going to put a link to the Kickstarter project in the video description. Please go there, check it out, give them your support. You won't be disappointed. Thanks to everyone at Roll for Combat, and let's jump into the build. All right, at level 1. For our class, we're going to start with Rogue. Rogues get more skills at level 1 than any other class in D&D, and when you multi-class into them, you only get to take one of those skills. So starting Rogue is important, I think. What's more, I think that the Rogue is a fitting chassis for a skill monkey. A lot of the value that Rogues bring to a party, as I've talked about in the past, right, is already in the form of non-combat stuff like scouting ahead, picking locks, disarming traps, etc. What's more, they have some nice like built-in ways of helping us with our secondary priorities. So when we first meet our character, they are, I would say, not a thief or an assassin necessarily, but more like a secret agent. They are crafty, they're well-traveled, they've made it their business to know everything about everything. As for our race, I think you've got to go either custom lineage or variant human here to get proficiency in every skill as quickly as possible, like I've stated, as our number one priority, right? The way we're going, custom lineage, variant human, doesn't really matter a whole lot, I don't think. Both get a free feat, which we need, as well as 1 skill proficiency. Custom lineage can choose between dark vision or a skill proficiency. Of course, we would take the proficiency. I'm going to go variant human, since it's the one that I tend to use less than custom lineage, but do what you need to do. As for the proficiency that we would take, let's go with survival. So that's number 1, our first proficiency. As for the free feat that we would pick up here as a variant human, the obvious choice is the skilled feat. It's right out of the player's handbook. It gives us proficiency with 3 skills of our choice. So I'm going to go with athletics, intimidation, and persuasion. So that's 2, 3, and 4. We now have 4 proficiencies already. As for our abilities, assuming as always that we're going with the point buy system, I'm going to give the entire stat line here, which I don't usually do. So 10 strength, 15 dexterity, take a +1 from variant human there, so we're at 16. 10 constitution, a 10 intelligence, a 14 wisdom, and a 13 charisma with our other +1 bonus in charisma, so we'd be at 14. I know. A 10 constitution is unconscionable. I don't think I've ever recommended going that low before on a build. But here is the thing. Constitution is actually the only stat in game that does not directly tie to one of our skills, our skill checks. So on the one hand, considering my priorities, Constitution was like the least important ability. Of course, as the old saying goes, a dead skill monkey succeeds at 0 animal handling checks. You could absolutely fiddle with these if you really can't stomach a 10 constitution. You could dump strength, dump intelligence, drop wisdom or charisma to a 13, and then get your constitution all the way up to 14 if you wanted for the better saving throws and more hit points. I'm just trying to get like all of my skill related abilities as decent as possible while getting my dexterity as high as I can for damage purposes, and also get wisdom and charisma to at least a 13 for multi-classing purposes. And I refuse to just settle for 13 because I hate odd numbers when it comes to ability scores. It's nice to have a +2 to both wisdom and charisma, as we will see later. As for equipment, pretty standard stuff for equipment. Just FYI, I'm definitely planning on keeping this character as far from the fight as possible. They're very talented and very, very squishy. So plan on using a short bow for now, and we'll change weapons later on as we go, but just, hide behind the barbarian. And I don't usually recommend skill proficiencies when, we're talking level 1 here, but I'm going to recommend some proficiencies here. You don't have to follow my recommendations exactly like letter for letter in order to pick up proficiency in every skill, but sometimes we're going to be a little more limited in the proficiencies that we choose. So I'm just going to kind of walk you through one optional path here. For rogue, I would take the skill proficiencies for rogues that are that tend to be most important for what rogues do best: acrobatics, perception, sleight of hand, and stealth. So those are proficiencies 5, 6, 7, and 8. Speaking of things I don't usually discuss, I need to point out that we do get 2 skill proficiencies from our background, of course. You can obviously use this to fill gaps somewhere if you take a different path than I'm laying out, but I'm going to recommend the faction agent background here, which I think is cool. And some of those like Sword Coast factions have a place in my heart that is near and dear due to run-ins that I've had with them in previous games. If it were me, I think I would choose for this character to be an agent of the Harpers, as I think it's absolutely perfect for like the story that I'm building in my head about this character as I create them. Someone who relies more on their wit, on their talent, than on their combat prowess necessarily, who operates behind the scenes like the Harpers are known to do. So this would let us take proficiency in insight and then one other wisdom, intelligence, or charisma skill, which for me would be investigation. So those are proficiencies 9 and 10. So right at level 1, we have 10 proficiencies already, which is great. 10 down, 8 to go. And then, of course, at level 1, rogues get expertise. Of course, that lets us double our proficiency bonus with 2 of the skills that we're proficient in. Already off to a great start as far as, meeting our priorities. I personally would recommend taking expertise in stealth and perception here, but feel free to go another route if you really want to. At level 1, rogues also get Thieves' Cant, of course, which is a nice flavorful way to sneakily communicate with others who can read and write in this special coded language. And then, of course, we get Sneak Attack, making sure that our damage isn't just the worst thing in the world. Once per turn, when we hit an enemy with a ranged attack or a finesse weapon attack, and we either have advantage on that attack or the enemy is standing within 5 feet of one of our allies, basically, we can add 1d6 of damage, and that will scale. So yeah, just make sure that you are shooting at enemies who are standing next to your friends. At level 2, there are only 3 classes that let you take a skill proficiency when you multi-class into them. Rogue is 1, Bard is another one. And I think that Bard is super fitting for a skill monkey build because, I mean, they are known as the jack of all trades, right? They even have like a feature that goes by that name. And with this character who, again, isn't going to be focusing a lot on damage, at least not at first, getting some levels in a class that is good at providing some support and utility to their allies, like a Bard, feels like the right move, I think. So not only are you a secret agent who knows everything about everything, you are a charismatic performer as well, smooth talking and suave. So, like I mentioned, when you multi-class into Bard, you get 1 skill proficiency, and Bards get to choose skill proficiencies in any skill of their choice, so you get 1 more skill of your choice here. I think performance is the obvious pick since it's the most bardy. That brings our total to 11 proficiencies. We also get the famous Bardic Inspiration at level 1 Bard, which allows us charisma modifier times per day, so only 2 for us, unfortunately, to use a bonus action and give one of our companions inspiration. Bardic Inspiration, that is, which means that they get a d6 that they can use in the next 10 minutes to add to an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw. Thanks, friend. You're welcome. We also get cantrips and first level spells here, and I don't know that I'm really going to recommend any. I'd kind of just say pick your favorites, though if it were me, I would probably be focusing on stuff that adds utility and support for this character. So things like Vicious Mockery, which is a favorite, Cure Wounds, Dissonant Whispers, Healing Word, Sleep, etc. I guess I just recommended some. The problem for us here is that our spellcasting ability is fairly low, right? Charisma, and so we're only a +2 to our charisma modifier. So if you're going to be casting something that the enemy gets to save against, your likelihood of success isn't amazing. Same goes for things that require a spell attack. So I think I would try to focus on spells that don't require a check of any kind, like buff spells or sleep, early on at least, anyway, or at the very least that target enemy saving throws that are typically low, like wisdom, charisma, and intelligence. And this will be true really throughout our character's career. At level 3, we are a Bard 2. We're going to stick with Bard here for a second for a very good reason, but for now we just get the aforementioned Jack of all Trades ability, which, while an incredibly apt description for this character, ironically becomes useless fairly early on for us, because what we're told with Jack of all Trades is if you don't have proficiency in a skill, then you get to add half of your proficiency bonus, rounded down, to your skill check. Ha! I scoff at you and your half proficiency bonus. We also get Song of Rest, which allows us to tell a soothing tale or sing a lovely melody when we're taking a short rest, so that anyone in our party who is spending hit dice to recover hit points can then add an extra d6 as they are just soothed by your calming, dulcet tone. Thanks, friend. You're welcome. At level 4, we are a Bard 3, and we get second level spells. Again, I'm just going to say pick your favorites. Some of mine here would be Invisibility, Lesser Restoration, and actually Enhance Ability, which is quite fitting for this character. It would let you touch a creature, including ourselves, stop touching yourself, and give them advantage on checks with one ability of your choice, so long as you maintain concentration. It also gives some additional benefits depending on the ability that you choose. This is another way to buff your skill checks if you want it. We also, at Bard 3, get another round of Expertise. Fantastic. So pick your 2 other most important or favorite skills and double your proficiency bonus for those now as well. That's Expertise in 4 skills now, and I'm feeling pretty good about our pursuit of our priority number 2. And finally, at Bard 3, we get our subclass, our Bardic College, and we are going with College of Lore. I think it's absolutely perfect thematically for our little know-it-all character. So here's what we read about lore bards. Bards of the College of Lore know something about most things, collecting bits of knowledge from sources as diverse as scholarly tomes and peasant tales. Whether singing folk ballads in taverns or elaborate compositions in royal courts, these bards use their gifts to hold audiences spellbound. When the applause dies down, the audience members might find themselves questioning everything they held to be true, from their faith in the priesthood of the local temple to their loyalty to the king. Perfect. So one of my favorite features of a lore bard is their cutting words feature. This is a really nice way to potentially protect your allies. When an enemy within 60 feet makes an attack or a damage roll or an ability check, actually, as a reaction, you basically cut them down to size with your words. You hurl an insult at them or distract them, I suppose. But you use a bardic inspiration die to lower the enemy's roll by 1d6. No saving throw. You just get to lower their roll, which is nice. You can even wait until after the enemy's roll to decide if you want to use this, which is extra nice. Most importantly for us, lore bards gain 3 skill proficiencies in any skill you'd like. So I'm going to take history, medicine, and nature. The more scholarly pursuits seemed appropriate here. So that's proficiencies 12, 13, and 14. At level 5, our most interesting person in the world has grown a bit weary of the life of espionage and subterfuge, I think. And so they turn their attention, momentarily anyway, to an area of scholarship that has admittedly been somewhat lacking for them thus far. They're turning to religion. You can't really blame someone whose job it is to know everything about everything for suffering a little bit, I think, from maybe some ADHD, right? And jumping from one class or scholarly pursuit to another. But regardless of your character's reason for doing so, we are taking 1 level of cleric here. But not just any cleric, of course, because at level 1, clerics get to take their subclass, their divine domain. And what else would our know-it-all feel a sense of reverence towards, if not a god of knowledge? So yes, we're taking the knowledge domain, which honestly is a subclass that I was starting to wonder if I would ever find an excuse to dip into in one of my builds. So I'm a little bit tickled to have a reason to take it here, even if it is just a dip. Here's what we read about knowledge clerics. The gods of knowledge, including Ogma, Bokob, Gillian, Arion, and Thoth. I probably mangled every single one of those. I apologize if so. Value learning and understanding above all. Some teach that knowledge is to be gathered and shared in libraries and universities, or promote the practical knowledge of craft and invention. Some deities hoard knowledge and keep its secrets to themselves, and some promise their followers that they will gain tremendous power if they unlock the secrets of the multiverse. Followers of these gods study esoteric lore, collect old tomes, delve into the secret places of the earth, and learn all they can. The main reason that we're here, of course, is that knowledge clerics get 2 additional languages, take your pick, and 2 additional skills to have proficiency in. The list to choose from here is quite limited. I'll take religion, naturally, and arcana. So 15 and 16. Also, our proficiency is doubled for checks with those skills. So we now essentially have expertise in 6 of our skills, which is faboo. We also, of course, at Cleric 1 get cantrips and spells, and I'm just going to say here that you, of course, have to take guidance as a cantrip, which lets you touch a willing creature who can then add a d4 to an ability check of their choice in the next minute while you maintain concentration. I can't imagine that you'll actually need this very often, but just in case. It's a nice way to further bolster our skill checks. Bless would be the other must-have spell here, I think, allowing you to pick up to 3 creatures and bless them so that over the next minute while you maintain concentration, they all can add a d4 to any attack roll that they make or saving throw. Now, you do have 2nd level spell slots at this point thanks to your multi-classing with Bard. So you could upcast Bless to cover 4 people, and that might cover your entire party. So I'm going to assume that we're casting Bless on ourselves, even though we're pretty low on the priority list as far as who gets Bless. So if you have more than 4 people in your party, I would say probably put it on yourself last, unless there's a 100% dedicated support character in your party, I suppose, that's not making attacks ever. But I really would, I think, use Bless on this character as their go-to concentration spell pretty much throughout their entire career. And seriously, your companions are going to love you. You just make everyone's life better, but you never hog the spotlight, except for at dinner parties, I guess. At level 6, alas, our person of all seasons has realized that religion just was not their cup of tea, and so they have turned their interest to the great outdoors. For our final multi-class, we're going into Ranger, which is the third and final class that gives us a skill proficiency when we multi-class into them at level 1. We do have a few other reasons for going Ranger, however. But as for that additional proficiency that we gain at Ranger level 1, I think I'd take Animal Handling, which seems fitting for Rangers. So that's 17 proficiencies now. Uno más. Keep in mind, too, we do get weapon proficiency with all simple and martial weapons when we multi-class into Ranger. So we can basically upgrade our short bow now to a heavy crossbow for a little more damage, a D10 as opposed to a D6. Equally compelling, however, as the proficiency that we gain is the nice little perk that Rangers get from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, the Deft Explorer feature, which replaces Natural Explorer. And at first level, this gives us Canny, which basically lets us get expertise in yet another skill that we are proficient in, bringing that total to 7 now, almost half of all skills. We also get to pick up 2 more languages, meaning that we are quite the multilinguist actually at this point. That's like, 6 languages that we speak? 7? Truly the world traveler. Finally, at first level Ranger, we get the Favored Foe ability, also from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, which replaces the Favored Enemy ability from the Player's Handbook. It essentially lets us add a 1d4 in damage to 1 attack per turn, each turn against a single enemy. We can use it proficiency bonus times per day. It's not a huge bump, but we are dying for some extra damage here, so we will take what we can get. Speaking of damage, I think it's time to do a damage report. I'm scared. Okay, so I'm just going for the absolute best case scenario here. We're making 1 attack per turn with our heavy crossbow that does a 1d10 of damage plus 3 for our dexterity bonus plus 1d6 for our sneak attack. Let's just pretend that you have put Bless on yourself as well, and that you happen to be using Favored Foe on this very unfortunate enemy. Are you ready for this? Drumroll. Against an enemy with a 10 armor class, you would do on average 14 damage per round, and against an enemy with a 15 armor class, a whopping 11 damage per round. Woo! Okay, it's okay. We're gonna be okay. Because you know what? We don't need no stinking damage. We are like the coolest cat in the room. Right? We are the grease in our well-oiled party's machine. We're enabling everyone to be better at what they do. We're sliding past security. We're talking our way past the guards. We're throwing shade at every perception check that comes our way. All the boys and all the girls love us and want to be us. We're like Beyonce. That's what I should have named this episode. The Beyonce build. At level 7, I promised proficiency in every skill by level 7 in the thumbnail, and so here we are, level 7. And as I've said, there's only 1 skill that we're missing proficiency in right now. Have you been keeping track? Can you guess what it is? That's right, Deception. So what we do here is we go back to Bard for Bard level 4, and we take the skill Expert Feat, which gives us proficiency in 1 skill of our choice, as well as expertise in yet another skill of our choice, and +1 to a stat even, and thereby achieving our goal, our rule, our number 1 priority of proficiency in every skill as soon as possible, and we got it by level 7. But you know what? I think I have a better idea. I'm gonna break my rule. Just for 1 teeny little second. Just for 1 level. Of course, if you really, really want to get proficiency as soon as humanly possible, then go this route for sure. But for me, now that we're practically there, we're nearing the end of the line, I'm thinking about the future. And if we can delay things by just 1 teeny weeny level, I think we can get some really nice mileage out of it. Will you indulge me? Thank you. So what I would do if I were playing this character is actually to go Ranger 2 here. We get some really nice benefits from additional ranger levels for both damage and our skills and proficiencies. First up, we get a fighting style, and archery is probably the best fighting style, I think, to boost damage in the game. So that's what we're taking. It lets us add a +2 to hit with ranged weapons. We also get ranger spells now, and again, I'm just going to say pick your favorites, focusing on utility and support. Hunter's Mark doesn't really do a ton for us as we're still only making one attack per turn, and later on we're going to need our bonus action. I would really just continue to use Bless, I think, for concentration. It really just is that good for your entire team. Keep in mind that thanks to multi-classing, we actually have 3rd level spell slots now. So we could bless up to 5 targets if need be. At level 8, we are a Ranger 3. We get Primal Awareness. This feature replaces Primeval Awareness from the Player's Handbook, and I think it's better. It basically, at this level, gives us like the Speak with Animals spell and lets us cast it once per day without spending a spell slot, so some potential utility there. And of course, Rangers at level 3 get their subclass, their Ranger archetype. And I did a Fey Wanderer build a few weeks ago, and I absolutely fell in love with the subclass. I wanted to revisit it today because it is pretty perfect for this build, helping us fill all 3 of our priorities. So first up, we get an extra spell, Charm Person, which is nice. Not that we needed a spell to charm people's socks off. We also get to choose a Feywild gift, which is basically my favorite thing about this subclass, even though it's purely flavor. I think for our suave little know-it-all, I'm probably going to pick the You Smell Faintly of Cinnamon, Lavender, Nutmeg, or another comforting herb or spice option. Most importantly, for this build, we get Otherworldly Glamour, which tells us that we get proficiency in Deception, Performance, or Persuasion. So our 18 proficiencies are now complete. Woohoo! Also, though, we get a nice little feature that really helps us with our priority number 2. When we make a charisma check, we gain a bonus equal to our wisdom modifier, right? That in and of itself is amazing. Since both of those ability scores were just okay for us, but not great, right? Now our charisma checks get a +4 instead of a +2, coupled with our proficiency bonus, and potentially even expertise. We will be the charmiest and deceptioniest character in the whole world. Finally, as a Fey Wanderer, we get a feature that adds to our damage as well, helping out with our priority number 3, right? Dreadful Strikes. So when you hit a creature with a weapon, you can deal an extra 1d4 of psychic damage once per turn. Not a ton, but we'll take what we can get. At level 9, we're going to go Ranger 4. So now that priority number 1 is complete and we have picked up a lot of things along the way to help us fulfill priority number 2, I want to keep going with Ranger for a minute, mostly to increase our damage. At level 4, we get an ability score increase or feat, right? And with Bless for our concentration and the archery fighting style, we really want to take the sharpshooter feat here, I think, which lets us add 10 damage to our ranged weapon attacks at the cost of a -5 to hit when we decide to use the feature, right? For a ranged weapon user, it's tough to beat this feat for pure damage output, so long as you have some nice ways to bump your plus to hit, and we do. So for a damage report at level 9, we've made some nice improvements. We're still using a heavy crossbow. We're only getting 1 attack per turn, but we're now adding a d4 from Dreadful Strikes and 10 from Sharpshooter, while picking up the +2 to hit from Archery Fighting Style. So assuming that we have Bless on ourselves against an enemy with an armor class of 10, we're now doing 22 damage per round on average, which is nearly double last time. And then against an enemy with a 16 armor class, it's 15 DPR. So, okay, still not very good, but still not the primary focus of this character. And it is much improved. By the way, you wouldn't turn off Sharpshooter here until an enemy armor class of 21. Also, by the way, in case you didn't know, I typically will compare my builds to one another in like a spreadsheet with graphs and things that I link to in the video description. I'm still going to put like the master comparison sheets for sustained damage builds down there, but I'm not going to add this character to that, primarily because I don't want them to feel bad. But hey, the damage is about to get significantly better. And to that end, at level 10, we would be a ranger level 5. And with sharpshooter and our plus to hit bonuses, there is not much we can do to benefit our damage more than picking up extra attack, finally, because 2 attacks is better than 1. Just keep in mind that for right now, we couldn't be making more than 1 attack per turn with a crossbow, since the loading feature prohibits that, so we would want to switch to a longbow for now. We also get 2nd level ranger spells now, and as usual, I would just say pick your favorites with the same focus as always. Pass Without a Trace is a favorite for me, to give your whole party a really nice buff to stealth checks when you really need it. At level 11, however, I think we've gotten the best stuff from Ranger for both damage and for buffing our skill checks. So I would like to do what we can to bolster our damage by revisiting some previous classes. First stop, Bard. Because we would then be a Bard level 4, we would get another ability score increase or feat, and I would love to have Crossbow Expert, naturally. For those who don't know, among other things, this feat lets us get an attack with a hand crossbow as a bonus action if we took the attack action and made our attacks with a one-handed weapon. So it's time to switch to a hand crossbow here and really stay there for the rest of our career. Since the feat also lets us ignore the loading property on crossbows that we just mentioned, we could now take the attack action with a hand crossbow, which would give us 2 attacks because we have extra attack, right? And then since the hand crossbow is a one-handed weapon, we could make a 3rd hand crossbow attack as a bonus action. All with +2 to hit, a d4 from Bless, presumably, and the sharpshooter feat turned on. And at this point, we're finally doing some pretty decent damage. Not necessarily competitive with characters who are optimized for sustained DPR, right? But we never were that. And so being awesome at what we're awesome at and still doing decent damage to boot feels really, really nice. At level 12, we're going back to our roots with Rogue 2. So there are really good ways now to buff both our damage and our skill checks with rogue levels. So I think, we finish off where we started. As a Rogue 2, we get the Cunning Action ability, right? Which allows us to disengage, dash, or hide as a bonus action. And as squishy as you are, you might be taking advantage of Cunning Action more than most. Hide behind the Barbarian. At level 13, we are a Rogue 3. Our sneak attack damage bumps up now to a 2d6, and one thing you can say about rogues, getting an extra 1d6 of damage every other level from sneak attack once per turn might not be a crazy amount of damage, but at least it consistently scales, and that's nice. And rogues, of course, get their subclass at level 3, and here's another first for me. We're going Soul Knife. New to Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, Soul Knife rogues are really cool thematically, though mechanically there is something that bugs me a little bit about them, but regardless, they are perfect for our purposes. Let's just read a smidge about them. Most assassins strike with physical weapons, and many burglars and spies use thieves' tools to infiltrate secure locations. In contrast, a soul knife strikes and infiltrates with the mind, cutting through barriers both physical and psychic. These rogues discover psionic power within themselves and channel it to do their roguish work. They find easy employment as members of thieves' guilds, though they are often mistrusted by rogues who are leery of anyone using strange mind powers to conduct their business. Most governments would also be happy to employ a soul knife as a spy. Amid the trees of ancient forests on the material plane and in the Feywild, some wood elves walk the path of the soul knife. Now, I know we've been multiclassing a lot, as is my wont, and that sometimes can make people a little uncomfortable from a roleplay and or story perspective, but tell me there isn't a pretty good coherent story for this character, right? The know-it-all likes to strike and infiltrate with their mind, not a big stretch, often employed as a spy, already there. So I'm thinking somewhere along our character's path here, they've unlocked some psionic potential. Maybe they unlocked it in themselves through their study, or maybe they learned it from a run-in with one of those aforementioned soul knife wood elves as we were exploring the Feywild. Maybe that wood elf is the very one who caused us to become touched by the Fey in the first place. Regardless of your reasons, we are taking soul knife here. So first up, twice per day, we get our proficiency bonus in psionic energy dice. So 10 of them at the moment, plus one more per short rest. They are a D6, and they are used to fuel some of our Soul Knife features, like Psychic Whispers, for example, which lets you choose a number of people equal to your proficiency bonus. So again, that's 5. You roll an energy die, and for that many hours that you rolled on the die, you can communicate telepathically with all 5 of those people when you are within a mile of each other. That's pretty powerful, and it's perfect for covert ops. But the main reason that I wanted to go with this subclass for our skill monkey is for the psi bolstered knack feature. So we are told here that if you fail an ability check or tool check, you can spend a psionic energy die and add it to the check. What's particularly crazy is you only spend the die if the check fails, and you have at least 11 of them a day. You're proficient in every skill. You have expertise essentially in 7 of them. You get to add your wisdom modifier to your charisma checks, and you have the guidance cantrip for an extra D4 on any skill check, right? And now you can basically add a D6 to every check on the extremely off chance that you actually ever fail one. I honestly just have a hard time believing that you're ever going to fail an ability check again, unless perhaps a natural 1 is like an auto fail on skill checks at your table. The one feature that we honestly are just not planning on taking much advantage of, unfortunately, is the Psychic Blades feature. I love the concept of this feature, but mechanically I love it a little less. You can basically summon and then make an attack with a psychic blade that does psychic damage, which is really nice. But since it's classified as a melee weapon with the finesse and thrown properties, it suffers a bit from other thrown weapons in ways that I'm not going to get into. I got into it a lot in a short that I did months ago, short for me, right? And so check that out if you want to kind of do a deep dive on the problem with thrown weapons. Anyway, it does a D6 in damage, and it lets you attack as a bonus action with a second blade that does a D4 of damage. It would let you add your dexterity modifier here to that bonus action attack, which is nice. It kind of gives you the benefit of the 2-weapon fighting skill without having to take the 2-weapon fighting style. So that's not nothing. But as far as I can tell, right, rules as written, you couldn't use that initial blade that you summon for extra attack if we had extra attack, and we do, as we're told that the blade vanishes once it hits, and then, you summon a second blade, a distinct separate second blade for that bonus action offhand attack. I don't know. It's good early, but it just doesn't scale very well, in my personal opinion. I will get around, I think, to doing a Soul Knife rogue built for damage one of these days, but that day is not today, unfortunately. We are a lot better at this point just sticking with our hand crossbow. So, speaking of how much better off we are for damage, let's do a damage report at level 13. Since last check, we have added both extra attack and crossbow expert, meaning that we do 3 attacks per turn now instead of 1. All with sharpshooter and our blessed die, as well as another D6 of sneak attack, up, for 2D6 total now. Don't forget to add the D4 in for dreadful strikes once per turn as well. So against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would be doing on average 56 damage per round. And against an enemy with a 17 armor class, it would be 39 damage per round. Let's see Beyonce do that. That's a heck of a lot better, right? I mean, okay, it's still trailing the lowest DPR build that I've done to date by a fair bit, at least at middling enemy armor class. But hey, we've really only been trying to focus on damage for 6 levels now. So cut us a little slack, por favor. At level 14, we would be Rogue 4, and we finally get to bump one of our ability scores. Woohoo! So yes, I would take dexterity to 18 here. At level 15, we would be a Rogue 5. Our sneak attack damage would be a 3d6 now, once per turn. And we get the Uncanny Dodge ability, which tells us that whenever an attacker we can see hits us, we can use our reaction to halve the damage. It's too bad it doesn't have the damage on all of that creature's attacks against you, right? If they have multi-attack, which many monsters do, especially by this level. But hey, it's useful, especially if they crit, so it's a nice to have for our survivability. At level 16, we are a Rogue 6, and we get yet another round of expertise. So Sure, why not? Now we can double our proficiency bonus in fully half of the skills in game, right? And we have proficiency with all of them. So priority number 2, thanks you. And finally, for us, at level 17, we would be a rogue 7. Our sneak attack damage would go up to 4d6. And we get another nice survivability feature, evasion, when we have to make a dexterity save to take half damage from like a spell or a trap, etc. that we can see. If we fail the save, we take half damage. If we make the save, we take no damage. Sweet. So for the final damage report then at level 17, things haven't changed a ton other than we've added, 2d6 more damage for our sneak attack, and we've bumped our dexterity modifier by 1. So against an enemy with a 10 armor class, we would be doing 68 DPR, and against an enemy with an 18 armor class, it would be 50 damage per round on average. And you know what? We actually managed to squeak ahead of the first monk build that I ever did, way back in the high and far off times. At this level only, right? And honestly, that probably says more about the poor scaling of monks in the late game than it does about how great this build's damage is. But hey, at least, we managed to creep into the bottom of like the tier 2 sustained DPR builds now, while being the greatest skill monkey of all time. Now, for those who might be interested in prioritizing damage a little more, still getting proficiency in all of their skills, but being willing to sort of delay getting proficiency in all skills in order to sort of bolster their damage a little bit more early on, stay tuned. In the final thoughts, I'm going to present a couple of alternative paths to what is essentially a very similar build. So, final thoughts. I promised at the beginning a couple of alternative paths for those who are interested in bumping their damage and prioritizing their damage a little bit more early on and delaying proficiency in every skill until a few levels later. I think there are 2 decent routes to go here. One would be to take Rogue at least to level 3 right at the beginning, because like I mentioned, Psychic Blades is pretty decent early on. You would have a weaponized bonus action for an attack, even though it's only with a d4, but it does let you add your dexterity modifier too, so that would be a nice damage bump. And then, from there you would just follow the build kind of as I laid it out, I think. Alternatively, you could go like Rogue 1. I'd still start Rogue 1, but then do 5 levels of Ranger right at the beginning. This would give you like the sharpshooter feat fairly early on. It would give you extra attack earlier on, right? And yeah, generally it would let you jump up to kind of okay damage. Earlier in the game, it would of course delay, getting proficiency in all of your skills until a few levels later, but for many of you, you might be fine with that. I should of course also mention that sure, there are other things you could potentially do to further bolster your skill checks if you really wanted to. Things like, Wild Magic Sorcerer that would give you advantage on an ability check, or Battlemaster's Tactical Assessment Maneuver, things like that. The goal here really wasn't to find like every single way to buff ability checks and incorporate them all into one build. Just, like I said, gain proficiency with all of them and then find some additional ways to enhance those skill checks via expertise and other things that we picked up, right? While increasing our sustained DPR as much as possible. And you know what? I think we did a pretty dang good job of accomplishing our goals. I think this character would be a blast to play, especially for those who maybe enjoy combat, right? They want to make a valuable contribution in combat, but it might not necessarily be their favorite part of the game. I'm sure many of us fall into that category. I know I have at least a couple of people at my own table that would fall into that category. Also, if you are someone who's maybe looking for a way to challenge yourself in combat, or maybe even most of all, I think the person who would love playing this character the most would be those who want to play a character that is just pretty dang good at almost everything in the game, maybe with the exception of being hard to kill. But, you let your friends take the spotlight during the fight, inspiring them, buffing them, contributing your fair share, but you don't mind. You're confident in the fact that once the fight is over, you are going to be the one that your teammates look to for pretty much everything else. So that's the build for the week. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I love you. I hope that you have a fantastic day. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you will like and subscribe and consider joining the channel as a member. All of those things really help support me and us so that we can create more and better content. So thank you for your support. And I hope to see you soon, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Take care.